Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Joining us now for World Brief and the review of some of the headlines of today's newspapers from around the world is Adefemi Akinsanya. Good morning, Adefemi.
Good morning, Doctor.
It's Friday.
It's Friday, isn't it? We made it to another week, thank God. Good morning, Ayo.
Good morning.
And good morning, Rufai. I hope you're all doing well.
We're doing well, Femi.
Yeah.
Femi.
That's me.
Welcome, man.
That's also me.
Oh,
All
yeah.
righty. Let me tell you what's happening around the world. Now, Eric Menendez has been denied parole by a California board that said his misbehavior during the decades he has already spent in prison for murdering his parents with his older brother Lyle back in 1989 showed that he is still a risk to public safety. Now, Eric's parole application was denied for 3 years, which means that he will be eligible for parole again in 2028. Now, his older brother, Lyle, who is scheduled to face his own parole suitability hearing today, Friday. Now, both brothers were made eligible for parole release after they were resentenced by a judge in May. Now, the brothers shot their parents, Jose and Kitty Menendez, more than a dozen times as their parents were watching TV in their Beverly Hills mansion 36 years ago. Eric even reloaded the gun and continued firing on his mother. He and his brother have long claimed self-defense and said that they were being sexually abused by their father, and that is why they sought to kill them. So this is a situation we'll wait to find out what his brother's fate is when he sits before the parole board. Moving on to the Middle East, and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says that he is willing to restart ceasefire talks with Hamas in exchange for the remaining hostages being released. Now, this comes as we reported earlier this week that Israel has launched a ground offensive to take control of Gaza City. It's already called up 60,000 additional reservists to help it in its effort. Now, protests did erupt over the news of this most recent offensive, with many hostage families saying that this only endangers those still left in Gaza. Hamas have agreed to the proposal drawn up by Qatar and Egypt for a 60-day ceasefire earlier this week on Monday, which, according to Qatar, would see the release of half of the remaining hostages in Gaza. Now, these new negotiations that Benjamin Netanyahu have announced are subject to a new location being agreed. Nothing really has been set in stone as yet. And on the topic of hostages, Israel believes that only 20 of the 50 remaining hostages are still alive. That's after 22 months of war. Now, from one war to the other, at least 9 people have been killed in Ukraine as Russia launched 574 drones and 40 missiles on Ukraine in one of the heaviest bombardments in at least a month. Now, Ukraine's Air Force counted 614 drones and other missiles fired by Russia overnight into Thursday and said that it had stopped 577 of them. It is the biggest air attack since July. While Russian strikes tend to focus on eastern regions close to the front lines, these latest attacks actually hit western areas of Ukraine as well. Now, Zelensky says that Thursday's airstrikes are proof that Russia has no desire to end this war. Well, those are your stories in the World Brief today. I'd love to hear your thoughts before we move on to the papers.
Okay, so a couple of things. Israel is now saying they want to take a ceasefire deal after they are still plummeting, or destroying, let me use the word, plummeting the prospect of, any sane resolution in Gaza and destroying the lives of the people. So they're having an operation there and it's free for all. We are killing people per second. I think the other day they killed over 50-something people. They're trying to build a settlement just across East Jerusalem, to be able to make it difficult to have any contiguous nation if they're to have a two-state solution, or like some people have recognized, a two-state, recognized in the state of Palestine. So, but they know the Palestinian Authority definitely will want to have their capital in East Jerusalem. So they're building along that area 3,500, properties to be built by the Israelis. But the interesting thing that came out recently with all the madness that is going on there is the fact that over 83% of the people killed in this conflict were actually citizens, were not fighters. Because Israel keeps claiming that it was Hamas fighters they're killing. But children and civilians, 83%. There was a new discovery made by The Guardian in partnership with some local Israeli newspapers. So it shows what is really going on there and the unfairness that is going on there. But hey, guess what? The world watches while all of this happens. The same world that fought against Srebrenica, the same world that called out Rwanda, the same world that called out the genocide, as reflected by Lemkin himself, who is a Jewish man, that first used the word genocide in his book in the 40s, the same world that called out the genocide then, that led to the Potsdam Agreement, that led to the Nuremberg trials, will never give Israel that kind of treatment because of the hypocritical world we live in. As regards Trump and peace and Ukraine, it's obvious where talks are today. So that being bullish, definitely. I mean, I said something the other day. I said Trump will understand what it means to play Russian roulette with a Russian, 1, 2, and an ex-KGB official. And he's seeing it now because Sergei Lavrov have come out to say that, yeah, we're ready for talks, but in a cheeky way, blaming Ukraine, saying, you guys don't want peace. Secondly, says they want to be part of the security guarantee.
Yeah.
So if Russia wants to be part of a security guarantee, that means there's no security guarantee. They want to scuttle talks. While all of this is going on, they are still bombarding Ukraine. Yes, so you can see the hypocrisy that is going on. So with due respect, Donald Trump does not know who he's dealing with. See, Sergei Lavrov has been in the mix for so many years. The Budapest Memorandum I keep talking about, way back 1994, Sergei Lavrov's signature was there as the permanent rep of Russia to the UN since 1994. This guy has been in the game. Where was Trump? What was Trump thinking about then in 1994?
Where were all of us in 94?
He was still doing real estate. So this guy knows the game more than you. Now Trump is seeing it.
Thank you, Rufai.
Let me just touch very briefly on Israel, especially because last Sunday evening, one of the biggest protests since the war started was staged, especially because the Israelis are asking that they just want their hostages back, they want their people back, and a number of people are getting quite tired or weary, and in terms of the war, Israel's war against Palestine. They're saying that, let's end this, let's bring our hostages home, let's move forward for a majority of people. In fact, for the takeover of Gaza City that Netanyahu has now been saying that if they don't achieve a peace deal or a ceasefire deal, that's the next course of action, and he really is keen on taking the city. They would need to get more boots on ground. They will need to call on the reservists. And a lot of people are saying, a lot of these reservists are loath to come back to fight. A number of them have said they didn't realize that the war was going to take this long, and they have been called a number of times to come back to fight. And so these are some of the issues that Netanyahu is grappling with on his pursuit of a ceasefire deal. Now, the reluctance or perhaps the skepticism here is that what happened with the last ceasefire deal.
Absolutely.
He violated the terms of the ceasefire deal, and again and again, just like Putin is saying, he's not really ready to see an end to the war until he's able to achieve his aim, which is to, to ground Hamas and take over, and Israel occupy fully Gaza. So in the next few days, it'll be interesting to see how they'll be able to broker a ceasefire deal that both parties would agree with. Currently, there are said to be 50 hostages. That Hamas still has Israeli hostages. Only 20 of them are said to still be potentially or possibly alive.
Yes.
With this new threat of hostilities, the concern is that it's going to put their lives at risk.
Correct.
And so the question then is that, does he really care about the people, or is he blinded by his ambition to take over Gaza, whatever the cost is, whether the people agree with him or not, whether or not lives are at risk, whether or not the hostages will come back to their family members? These are some of the things that why a lot of people are now criticizing him heavily and moving more towards perhaps even more sympathy for Palestine, more sympathy for recognizing it as a state, more sympathy for the people there, and also, of course, the humanitarian crisis. So in the next few days, I'm not very optimistic as to what would come out of that ceasefire deal, but he says he's ready to do it. The Israeli people are more and more getting tired and weary of this war, and maybe perhaps that would be the strong arm to making him finally, agree to something. Or perhaps he would hold on to his ambition and continue until he sees Gaza flat.
Thank you, Ayo.
Okay. I think there should be no excitement or cause for celebration that Netanyahu says that he's ready to participate in talks with Hamas, because he provided a clause. He says that the talks will be on the basis of terms acceptable only to Israel. In other words, he's not out for negotiation, and he's not interested in whatever the international community is saying. what are the terms that are acceptable to Israel? One, the unconditional release of all the remaining 50 hostages in Hamas custody. Two, the demilitarization of Hamas. Three, the non-participation of Hamas officials in future elections in the Gaza Strip. Israel being given the opportunity or being allowed to control the perimeter across the Gaza Strip. In other words, it's a take it or leave it proposition. Qatar and Egypt have put on the table a 60-day ceasefire deal. Netanyahu has not responded to that. That's not what he's talking about. He's saying that, look, if you want to talk, come and talk, and you talk only on our own terms. That's not how international diplomacy works. And that's why I say nobody should put any prospect by this. Since July, Israel has continued the bombardment of the Gaza Strip. It has even given instruction to humanitarian agencies and other agencies to evacuate Gaza City. And it has refused to respond to the statement by 27 countries,
yes,
including Australia, including UK, Japan, 27 of them, yes, Germany, saying that international journalists, media, should be allowed access to monitor developments in that region. No. After having killed 192 journalists in the course of this war, according to Committee to Protect Journalists based in New York. That's why I say no optimism. The situation between Russia and Ukraine is worse. What Putin has just pointed out is that he's above international law. And this is at a time President Trump, European leaders are coming together to say, well, let's find a pathway to peace. And in the midst of that, he has continued bombardment on the Eastern Front from the Crimea front.
Yes.
Now, the attack was restricted to the eastern region of Ukraine. Now is the western region that they are attacking. The western and southwestern region, where even the Americans are keeping their arms and ammunition, and the European leaders, where they store, the equipment that they provide to support Ukraine. So is that not an act of defiance? Out of the 614 drones and missiles that were fired overnight, Ukraine says they were able to deflect about 577 of them. Yes. But even then, there were casualties. Yes. So what Putin is also saying is that there can be peace only on his own terms. And what are his own terms? He wants to take more than the fifth of Ukraine. He occupies a fifth of the Ukraine at this particular moment. Yes. He wants more. So all that talk about the next meeting, even Trump has said he's not going to be part of any trilateral meeting. Yes. But if necessary, I will come. And now Zelensky looks like the one who wants peace. He says he can go to Switzerland, Austria. He doesn't mind meeting in Istanbul, but he doesn't want Budapest because of the behavior of Viktor Orban.
Correct.
Because Viktor Orban is openly pro-Russian. Yes. So Budapest is out of the equation in Zelensky's consideration. Yes. But would that meeting even take place? As for the Menendez brothers, well, that's unfortunate. Two young boys killing their parents, saying that they were abused by their father. It's a terrible story about family life, but it was only in May that a judge converted the life sentence without parole to 50 to life. That's why they're entitled to parole this time. Yes. But Eric, as due to his terrible behavior in prison, has been denied. Lyle will be facing the board today. Yes. And so the story is developing, even if their family members are pleading. But Eric will have another opportunity in 3 years' time. 3 years. And the board was very categorical. There's nothing anybody can do about it. But it's a tragic family story. It is. Already well dramatized in movies and in literature.
Documentary, indeed, indeed. Thank you all for your wonderful submissions to the World Brief, as always. Let's take a look at newspapers now. This day leads with Nigeria's gross external reserves. Now, these reserves are actually assets, including foreign currency and gold, that are under the leadership or the guardianship of a country's central bank. So that's what we're talking about here. Those have risen to a 4-year high of approximately $41 billion as of mid-August 2025, driven by increased foreign exchange inflows from the Central Bank of Nigeria's economic reforms. These include rising crude oil output and sustained currency stability. Now, this significant accumulation of reserves, which stood at roughly $37.3 billion just in late June of 2025, has been seen as a positive development for the Nigerian economy. But as we've heard already discussed in the morning show, you have to put these numbers into context. It's not really transforming the lives of the everyday Nigerian. Now, this day also reports on the unveiling of the newly constructed Hotel Presidential in Enugu State by Governor Peter Mbao, who described the 62-year-old building built under the former premier of the Eastern region, Dr. Michael Akpara, which had been neglected for the past 15 to 20 years as a homecoming for history. Now, the Daily Independent's picture headline does actually show this new and improved Hotel Presidential. Its actual headline, though, is a continuation of this feud within the People's Democratic Party, or rather the opposite of a feud, as Oyo State Governor Seyi Makinde dispels claim of a crack within the southern faction of the party. However, he did throw a jab at the Minister of the FCT, Nyesom Wike, saying that he wouldn't go into the gutter with him. Now, to the New Telegraph, which says that ASU, which is the Academic Staff Union of Universities, has warned of a looming nationwide strike, accusing the federal government of failing to honor its commitments. The union president said lecturers are at a breaking point, highlighting the severe promise strain on Nigeria's public university system. Now, The Punch leads with the Chief of Defense Staff, General Christopher Musa, linking the recent surge in killings across Nigeria to the build-up of the 2027 general elections. Now, the country has in recent times, of course, witnessed renewed terror attacks in the northeast and attacks by bandits in the northwest. Now, Benue and Plateau states continue to be epicenters of these killings, which brings me to the front page of the Daily Trust this morning, which leads with the latest lines following the Katsina mosque attack, where searches continue as more than 50 bodies have been recovered already. Now, this violence is an example of what the Chief of Defense Staff says some politicians are deliberately fueling in order to discredit the government's security record and campaign on the back of chaos. These are very, very strong claims from the Chief of Defense Staff. Now, here's an interesting story on the front page of The Guardian. We see that the Alafin of Oyo and the Oni of Ife are at loggerheads. Now, the latest occupants of both of these thrones, Oba Akim Owaje and Oba Adeyeye Ogumusi, are in dispute over the right of conferment of a traditional chieftaincy title on a subject, on a person. Now, on Monday, the Alafin issued a 48-hour ultimatum to the Oni of Ife, demanding the revocation of the contentious chieftaincy title, describing the Oni's actions as an affront to his own authority, insisting that only the Alafin has the exclusive right to confer titles covering the entirety of Yoruba land. And finally, the Vanguard picture headline story does show that the Olu of Warri, His Majesty Ogiame Atuwase III, is leading or has led a majestic regatta display of cultural pride and royal splendor. Now, this historic journey on these waterways is a central event which is celebrating the monarch's 4th coronation anniversary. Those are your papers.
Okay. Thank you so much.
So sorry, we're out of time. I mean, but really concerning the headline around ASU contemplating going on strike,
yes,
as a result of some of the promises made by the government that wasn't fulfilled. And again, just like what you were saying earlier, Dr. Abati, that we keep talking about these macroeconomic wins, but when we talk about the real issues that people are facing, they're talking about their pensions being delayed, not anywhere near sufficient, talking about salaries being
owed, and all of that.
Just to congratulate the people of Enugu and the people of the Eastern region.
Yes.
Because the presidential hotel that was left behind,
yes,
Hotel Presidential, it's called,
yes,
by Michael Okpara, who was
yes,
governor of the Eastern region at that time, was not just for people of Enugu, was for the whole Eastern region.
Yes.
And many states have many assets wasting away like that. It has taken Dr. Peter Mba of Enugu State to recover this asset that was wasting away and reinvent it.
Absolutely.
I think other governors should follow his example. Absolutely. I don't want to embarrass any state government, but I know some states where assets are wasting away because every governor wants to come in and take personal glory. Please, can we keep these assets going? Thank you very much.
Always a pleasure.
Adefemi.